In this video, we're going to look at 10 of the best and worst cars that hit the 80s. This is the AMC Eagle SX4. Now this car sounds like it was dreamt up by a committee that couldn't quite agree on anything. It's not exactly a car, though it sure looks like one. It's not a truck, but it sure has the utility to make one blush. The only thing left to call it is, well, they called it a multi-purpose vehicle. Now, you might be wondering, what the hell is that? Well, AMC, bless their hearts, had a very specific niche they wanted to fill with the Eagle line. They were trying to give you real passenger car comfort and styling, but in a vehicle that could tackle the foulest weather or the roughest roads. The SX4 in particular was the smallest of the Eagle line. And here's what's interesting about this car. AMC didn't even make that engine. No, they bought it from Pontiac. Now, why would an American car company buy an engine from a competitor? That, my friends, is a puzzle piece we'll get back to. The engine itself was coupled to a new 5-speed Borg-Warner manual transmission. What kind of mad scientists were working at AMC? And the base price, just under $7,500. Not bad, right? Now, for comparison, did you know that in 1980, the average new car price was around $7,200? The Eagle was right in that sweet spot, but offering something truly unconventional. But here's the key distinction, and something that made them stand out from the crowd. Extra ground clearance and those flexible fender flares. They practically dared you to take them off the beaten path. The interior, though, was, in true AMC fashion, pretty straightforward. Not a lot of fancy gauges, but one thing really jumped out at me, which was that stick shift jutting up from the floorboard. But let me tell you the real genius of this car, the select drive switch. Think about it. In the 80s, you could change from two-wheel drive to four-wheel drive without ever leaving your seat. Now you might be wondering, why was this such a big deal back then? Well, it fundamentally changed how people thought about using four-wheel drive. It wasn't just for mudding anymore. It was for everyday versatility. And that, gentlemen, is what the Eagle was all about. However, there were a few trade-offs. That fastback hatch, while sporty, did limit headroom for rear seat passengers. And the spare tire, well, it took up a good chunk of the already limited cargo space. But here's a neat trick. The back bench folded flat, giving you a surprising amount of utility when you needed it. Let's be clear, it's not an Abrams tank, but for occasional off-road use, it was a truly good combination of car and mule. It walked that line between comfortable commuter and capable adventurer. Acceleration, though, was modest at best. Let's not sugarcoat it. And the ride was, understandably, harsher than most sedans. It's built for versatility, not for floating on clouds. What's more interesting is that, for all its ruggedness, the SX4 was surprisingly quiet on the highway, with very little gear whine. I really couldn't find much to criticize about the SX4. It combined the car, truck, and Jeep vehicle concepts very well. Moving on to one of the worst cars, we have the DeLorean DMC-12. I know, the DeLorean, the stainless steel dream machine, the car that went back to the future. Everyone loves it, but hear me out on this one, because beneath that shiny, iconic exterior, there's a story that's a lot less Hollywood and a lot more, well, let's just say it's complicated. Let's start with the body. You could have the DeLorean in any color, as long as it was stainless steel. That was the only color, the only finish of every DeLorean that rolled off the troubled assembly line. Now, you might be thinking, stainless steel? That's amazing, it won't rust. And you'd be right, it won't rust. But here's the issue. Contrary to many news reports, the DeLorean's body wasn't solid stainless. It was steel sheets laid over fiberglass inner panels. So, it looked tough. But was it really? Well, the DeLorean is a rear-engine car with all elements of the drivetrain behind the rear wheels. For a car that looked like it could break the sound barrier, a 2.9-liter V6 wasn't exactly setting the world on fire. It was a compromise, a practical choice for a car that was anything but. And up front, you'd find a wide, flat, but very shallow luggage compartment, just right for a couple of bags for that weekend jaunt. So a grand touring car that couldn't handle a grand tour. And here's another quirk, the gas filler. Not only that, but you had to raise the entire hood to fill it up. Imagine pulling into a gas station in your futuristic supercar and having to pop the hood just to get fuel. And yeah, inside it was luxury with a bit of sportiness. But for all the talk of luxury, the main door glass was fixed, with only small electric vent windows for the occasional toll booth. In an era where power windows were becoming standard, this felt like a step backward. But driving the DeLorean, that's where everything falls flat. 0 to 60 could be clicked off in a leisurely 10 seconds. For a car that looked like it belonged on a racetrack, that's hardly impressive. To put it in perspective, the average family sedan of the era could often match or beat that. Another complaint, and a significant one, very limited visibility in all directions. Imagine driving a car that looks this good, but you can barely see out of it. It's a recipe for white knuckles, not joyrides. And you know what's funny? At $25,000 per copy, they claim quite a few exotic cars costing much more did worse. That's a low bar, isn't it? What do you guys think? So in my opinion, the DeLorean wasn't a failure because it was ugly or unloved. It was a failure because it was a car of compromises. It's really quite a car for a movie prop. Sometimes folks' dreams are better left on the drawing board. Next up, for one of the best cars we have, the Jeep Grand Wagoneer. And folks, if you're looking for a vehicle that defined an era, then buckle up, because this is the granddaddy of four-wheel drive station wagons and a true American icon that deserves its place on any best of list. This isn't just a four-wheel drive wagon, it's the longest, the widest, the tallest, and the heaviest. And if that wasn't enough, it's also the oldest, most powerful, most luxurious produced four-wheel drive station wagon made anywhere in the world. Now, you might be a little skeptical. What kind of vehicle checks all those boxes? Well, let's take things step by step. Despite being smaller than many mid-size cars of its day, its tractor-like grille and 4,500-pound weight gave this an undeniable appearance. It looked like it could handle almost any natural or social disaster. This was a vehicle from the 80s that prioritized passenger comfort in a way most cars today still struggle with. You could actually get 3 adults in the back comfortably. And if it was cargo you were after, that plush bench could be folded or even removed entirely to provide a truck-like capacity of 95 cubic feet. But you might find the interior and dash a bit like a gussied-up pickup. There's plastic wood and deep pile carpeting everywhere. And frankly, I wish Jeep would have spent a little less time on their trim and more on solving the problem of instrument glare. But one place where money was supremely well spent was on the Select Track system. This dash-mounted switch meant no more jumping outside to lock the front wheel hubs. Just a flick of a switch and you were in four-wheel drive. Think about the convenience that offered in a sudden snowstorm or on a muddy trail. Think about the convenience that this offered in a sudden snowstorm or on a muddy trail. And once engaged, the Wagoneer truly showed its Jeep lineage. It could take on almost any terrain put before it. The sheer weight and wide stance of this beast made it harder to get stuck than to get on the Boston Social Register. But that shouldn't surprise you. The normal on-road performance of the Wagoneer certainly will. The ride was bouncy, yes, but not rough. Noise was pretty limited, making this Jeep a surprisingly comfortable long-trip vehicle. About the only thing one might find socially unacceptable about the Wagoneer was its mileage. But here's the truth. For a vehicle that offered this much capability, this much space, and this much presence, the mileage was a small price to pay. The 1983 Jeep Grand Wagoneer wasn't just a car, it was a statement. It was proof that you didn't have to sacrifice comfort or style to conquer the great outdoors. And that's why, even today, it remains a true legend. Next up, for one of the worst cars, is the '87 Renault Alliance GTA. And let me tell you, this was a car that tried way too hard to be something it wasn't. Its most pleasant surprise, they said, was its handling. But here's the kicker. The larger sway bar that stiffened up the rear also allowed the inside wheel to lift easily. When that happened, the rear end lost traction and tended to hop around the corner. The fact that a performance car had a tendency to hop and lose traction in corners is insane. The moderately fast and precise steering and aggressive traction from the tires could only do so much to compensate for a chassis that was clearly being pushed beyond its comfort zone. AMC also tried to make the interior high performance. The seats were the latest Renault design and included see-through head restraints. But the rest of the interior was, much the same as what you'd usually get, just with a leather-wrapped steering wheel. And the Jensen AQ sound radio? Confusing to say the least. And sunlight made the equalizer indicators hard to read, especially in the convertible. And for all the talk of safety, the early two-door didn't even have the front passive restraint system that became standard on some other Alliance models. And there were no shoulder belts for the rear seats. Let's be real. This was an economy car trying to wear a sports car's clothes. It showed that small AMC was still capable of larger efforts, but those efforts often felt like a desperate attempt. The GTA was a compromise, a car that tried to be a performance machine but ultimately felt like an Alliance in a slightly ill-fitting costume. It's really quite a car, if you squint hard enough and ignore the details. Up next, we have one of the best cars ever, the Pontiac Fiero. Folks, this car is a testament to what happens when passion meets ingenuity. To be honest, it's not easy to be different in a large corporation like General Motors, and the Fiero is proof. It took over 5 years for the Fiero to reach production. The goal was to make a very small, two-seat commuter car that just happened to be fun to drive. And how sweet it was when it came to handling. The near-perfect placement of the engine, just behind the driver, but just ahead of the rear wheels, made the Fiero feel like it was on rails. The stiffer springs and shocks of the handling package ensured excellent wet and dry adhesion and making spins almost impossible. Acceleration times were above average for modern cars, with 0 to 60 coming in at a respectable 11.2 seconds. Even better straight-line performance would come when a V6 was added next year, but we mustn't forget the Fiero brakes. While a bit touchy, with a tendency for the rear wheels to lock up first, all in all, they were very secure. And the interior was first-rate. It felt much roomier than most sports cars, and seats were very comfy. Stereo speakers were cleverly located in each headrest. Instrumentation was nearly complete and highly legible. Everything was electronic, including the speedometer. And Pontiac, thanks for making the left-hand parking brake lever always rest in a down position. The Fiero also had a secret, a small but deceptively good cargo space. The deep cavity behind the engine could take one hard-sided suitcase or a few soft bags. In fact, Pontiac would even offer a special set of Fiero luggage as an option. While I always saw the Fiero as a sports car, Pontiac tried to keep it faithful to the original commuter car image. Still, if the Fiero was so well conceived and executed, it must also cost a bundle, right? Well, the base version was under $8,000. No doubt this was the commuter's bargain of the year, a true testament to American ingenuity, and a car that proved you could have fun, style, and efficiency all in one groundbreaking package. Next up for one of the worst cars is the Pontiac 1000. This is a car that makes you wonder if anyone at the factory actually drove it. You'd think that in the early 80s, with all the innovation happening, automakers would be pushing boundaries. Instead, Pontiac brought back the Chevette, cleverly disguised as the Pontiac 1000. To their credit, they did do quite a lot of tinkering to make this stand tall. You had that slick-looking lower air dam and blacked-out chrome, but this was still just another import. It was like putting lipstick on a pig. But as you opened those two small portals, a very American interior awaited. For one thing, the seats were covered in this sturdy fabric, supposedly better quality than the Japanese, but the dash was maybe a little too simple. Despite appearances, seating was pretty cramped. The lack of shoulder room in the front and those small doors combined with little legroom made this 1000 only suitable for carpools of two. The aesthetics of the car were mostly acceptable, but under the hood lay the rest of a sadder story. A neatly packaged 1.6-liter four-cylinder, the smallest engine GM made, and its output? Just 65 horsepower and 80 pound-feet of torque. Not much for a heavy 2,200 pounds of compact, and that, it turns out, was an underestimate. 0 to 60 time in nearly 30 seconds. So what was the culprit? The culprit here was the 3-speed automatic that refused to downshift into passing gear. You won't have to worry much about getting caught for speeding. All this then brings us to price. The base 1000 cost $5,500, a fair bargain. But with air conditioning, automatic, and a few other odds and ends, it totals $7,200. A truly baffling choice for anyone who actually enjoyed driving. We end the video with the best car of the 80s, the '84 Corvette. This car redefined what an American sports car could be. It introduced a tuned port injection V8 and cutting-edge tech like ABS and traction control. For the first time, the Corvette wasn't just a straight-line missile, it was a true sports car, and in the context of the 1980s, it was a revelation. And it wasn't just a redesign, it was a complete re-engineering. The '84 Corvette was 8.8 inches shorter overall and had 1.1 inches less height than the '82 model. But here's the brilliance. It was still 2 inches wider and a significant 250 pounds lighter. The graceful fenders and that sloping windshield cut the air smoothly, but inside there was much more driver and passenger shoulder room and greatly improved luggage space. Even the fuel filler door was meticulously designed with an integral cap holder. The slick styling didn't stop there. Retractable halogen headlights rotated a remarkable 167 degrees to maintain the desired hood profile, and the front opening hood, reminiscent of a Jaguar XKE, was the largest single piece of fiberglass ever molded for a production car. This was designed with purpose. But was this car really worth all the fuss? Well, with a top speed of about 138 miles per hour, it sure was. 205 horses at 4,800 RPM, plus you got a hardly slow time of 7.9 seconds dashing from 0 to 60. Not the fastest of any car you could buy, but definitely in a very small fraternity. Despite some minor flaws, it was the best combination of everything a performance car should be. It was a statement that America was back, and it was here to innovate.